Okay, we're recording. Take it away.
Hey, Lynette.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm doing good.
Good.
All things considered, yes, God is good. I
Good.
just had my surgery I ended up being positive for COVID and it postponed my surgery. And so God willing, we'll have surgery. I'll be negative next week and I'll have surgery next week.
So you're hanging in there.
Yeah, I'm hanging in there.
Good.
Well, I'm loving seeing all these smiley faces.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good crowd this morning.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Well, I invited a few people from Lubbock here, but they haven't shown up yet, so hopefully they'll get here.
I was going to say, should we give people a few more minutes to log on before I get things going?
Maybe like 2 more minutes and then I think we'll be ready to go. Let's see. I'm trying to help out a couple of people with their picture. Okay. Seems so strange. Rotten 21 is the year though.
It still feels like 2020. What do you mean?
Nothing changed.
Continuation.
Yeah.
No.
As they posted on Facebook, does it bother anybody else that it's pronounced 2021 WON?
Yep. Okay, let's see if this will help her. Okay, that's. Hi, Donna.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to help Liz get her picture. Liz, can you hear us? I don't think she can hear us either.
Yeah, she may have to log out and log back
Hey,
in.
Donna.
That's what I told her.
Oh,
That's what I'm hoping she'll try.
she left.
Okay. So maybe it'll work because I know when I have to do it, I have to hit the button that says video and audio and everything. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll see. All right.
Oh, I see Janet. Janet, I put my signature papers in the mail yesterday.
Oh, great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure thing.
Okay. Let's see. Well, that was very dramatic.
Janet, you got mine?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
And I emailed mine back this morning.
I didn't see any attachment. I'll have to double check.
Okay.
I saw the thank you, but I didn't see an attachment.
Okay. Let me know if you don't get it because I've been having trouble with my email real bad this week. I had to
Okay.
switch from Outlook to another one and it's a learning curve. It's fine.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes, but I can't see you.
Well, when I joined, I've never seen it before, but there's like a camera with the line through it.
Yes.
And I've never seen that screen before. So is it something I've messed up?
I don't know. It may just be it. I had to update my Zoom, and if you updated yours or if it did it may have reset things and you have to go back in and change the settings back.
Well, I'll just listen today.
Okay. All right. Well,
Cindy Rios,
Hey, Donna.
where are you, girl?
I'm where I wish I was.
It looks like there's a palm tree waving behind you.
Oh, yeah, I'm on the beach in my mind.
that's so funny. Well, I think we've got how many participants? We've got 19 participants. Let's go ahead and start. And anybody that's late, we'll just work on in.
Okay, well, welcome to 2021, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rick Treon. You can call me Ricky, and I am the new president of the Texas High Plains Riders. And I guess this is me sort of, gaveling in our first meeting of the year. So thanks everyone who joined us virtually and who is going to join us, in the next half hour or so before our program gets started. I guess the first thing we usually do is see if there's any guests in the audience and welcome them. I know some were going to join us from Lubbock, but I'm not sure if any have made it yet. But if we do have anybody joining us as a guest, go ahead and say hello and let us know where you're from. But yeah, I think everybody's a usual member so far. All right.
Hi, Linda.
So the next thing I should probably say is that if you are a member, dues are due by the end of the month, I think, unless somebody is going to correct me on that, but I think that's true. I hope so, because I'm planning to do mine in between this meeting and the board meeting later on this afternoon, because I have forgotten thus far. But yes, please, if you have not paid your dues, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, you'll have to deal with our people. We'll send them for you. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I'm definitely glad there's a grace period, because I never remember to do these things. If they're not on auto pay, I never remember by the first of the year. So don't worry if you haven't paid them, but that is when they're due, is by the end of the month. Next, has anyone who is, go ahead.
Can we mail them?
You can, I don't know who's asking, but you can mail your dues or you can pay via PayPal, and we will not hold it against you if you pay anytime the rest of the year. However, we would appreciate if you could get them in January, because that helps us with knowing how much money we have for the year.
Mail them on the website.
Yes.
It's the address on the website.
I believe the address is on the website, but there's also, and there also is a PayPal cart on the website too.
Did you get my dues? I paid.
Yes, I have you down.
Perfect. Thank you, Cindy.
I have a question. On the website, it says that once you pay your dues, you're supposed to be emailed a password to get back into the member section every year.
Yes, our members section won't let anybody log in anymore, because people that we have the plugin that does that, they discontinued the login form.
Ah.
So we're looking for a new members only section, and I'm just going through trying to find where's a good one that's user friendly, because the last one was not so user friendly.
Okay. Well, thank you for telling me that.
Yeah,
because I was wondering.
Yeah, don't freak out about it. If you have anything to change, if anybody has anything to change, if they'll email me directly, I will get that fixed for you, because I can go in the back door and make changes. I just can't they just took the form down and nobody can log in, and I can't download it again because they discontinued it. So
Kim, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Who's going to take minutes today of the business meeting? Since Summer's not here.
Oh, Summer's not here. I can take minutes. I can do that real quick. Let me just do that real quick. Let me start. We haven't had any motions yet, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. All right.
All right. So the next thing, has anyone published anything since we met last in the last few months? Any good news to share on that front?
Well, I had a 9-book collection series called Halloween Night, the Golden Locket collection series, and it was all together in one book. And I did spread those out to 9 different books, and I got them republished. So they're out there now.
Good job.
Cool.
Excellent. All right.
She's not here, but Natalie Bright's.
Yes.
Oh, that's right.
I guess it's up. Is it up for pre-sale or is it out?
It
And then
should
the
be
next-
out.
I think it's out. Yeah, they get.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because she had the book launch anniversary, of whatever it was. Book birthday. That's what it was.
Yeah. Well, I'm real excited about watching how she did this because she wrote with a co-author and seemed to not have any problems, which famously had problems doing. And she's doing the rapid release of a 3-book series, like 1
Oh,
month
good.
apart.
Mhm.
So
Wow.
I think it'll be really fun to watch and learn from what she's doing.
And
If
maybe
anybody-
she'll do a program for us about how
Want-
that worked for
Wanting
her.
to pay attention
Yeah.
to what she's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would hate to wish working with a co-author upon anyone who wanted to be my co-author. So congrats on those two.
Yeah, I'm beginning to think that I may be the mitigating factor. It's not the co-op. It's just me.
Okay, can you hear me? This is Liz.
Yes.
Okay, Bill put together Gentleman's Promise, Perplexity, and Panic Point into a collection. But right now, we're just putting it on Kobo. See if we can kind of build the audience. We're not quite ready to put it on Amazon yet. Still like more of the individual sales. But Kobo's a hard market when you're not there every day. But I'm trying to put this book in different promotions and see how it goes. So that's something we're trying. And that's it.
All right.
Last year, November the 11th, I released my book, Letter from Bellawood, and I've been talking about it on the Facebook page. And yesterday, it's about World War I and the influenza epidemic of that time. And yesterday, I received a publication. It's in Kirkus Reviews this month,
Wow.
Awesome.
a review of it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Wow.
Excellent. All right. Anyone else?
I wish.
Yeah. No, I'm already late on one of my manuscripts, so that's something I think a lot of people are dealing with, is trying to, get things finished whenever everything's kind of going haywire. And believe it or not, having all this time to write does not actually translate into having more time to write. So
That's so true.
Agreed.
So true.
Funny how that works, That's just wrong.
Well,
I've been
problem-
trying to learn how to do website, my website. I've been working on that for the last couple of months, and there's no time left to write after I do my website.
It is.
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
nice.
Website stuff is my biggest procrastinate. I have to make myself not do stuff to my website.
My problem is I like to go to a restaurant like Popeyes or Arby's or somewhere and eat, and then I sit there for 2 hours and write, and I can't go into those places anymore, so I'm not getting any writing done either, because there's too many distractions here at home.
Yeah.
Rick, would you like me to share what the balance is in our checking account with the members?
Is that something we would do now, or I guess we have an actual board meeting at 2? Am I right, Kim, on that?
Yes, but for the membership, that is something we need to
Oh,
respond with them. Yeah.
okay.
That's part of the business meeting.
Then
that
yes.
Yeah, that's part of the business meeting that we have for the members. So we currently have $11,648.55 in the bank. And we recently had, we participated in the Panhandle Gives. And they kicked in some as well. And we got $483.71 from that. And I do want to thank Kim. She was a very large donor to that. And that amount would not be what it is if it wasn't for Miss Kim.
Well,
Thank you,
that was
Kim.
in Susie's honor because our group really lost a treasure when we lost her. So
So, thank you.
you're welcome. And
Are there any other usual business stuff that I forgot about?
I would like to report that the anthology is ongoing. I'm working really hard to get that put together. I've got everybody's edits except for one, and I can't tell you who that is right now. I got Janet's and I got Donna's and I got Christine's. And I'll have to look through there and see who said they would do it that hadn't got back with me, and I'll check with that. But if we get that back pretty soon, I should have, fingers crossed, by the end of the month, I should have it released. So we're working hard on that.
Cool.
I haven't heard anything about an edit. What?
The anthology was for the 2021, but it was last year's, and we had a submission date we extended it to the end of September. And it was just short stories. And
But I turned in I turned in a story, but I haven't heard anything about an edit.
Oh, it's just a proofread for that the board of directors was doing to get it checked through.
Oh,
No, it's not anything that you're in there and you're good. So
okay.
yeah, we just kind of broke it up into pages so that we could double check and just have more eyes on the manuscript before it goes to press.
Oh, you're editing it.
Yes. Just to check and make sure everybody's good. So, but
Okay.
hopefully we'll have. Oh, go ahead.
I'm in another writers group back in Louisiana, and I have to edit my work in that one. So I thought, well, when am I going to have to edit?
No,
But
it's
okay.
yeah,
I'm glad y'all are doing the work.
yeah, we're doing the work, and Ashlyn put together a beautiful cover. I think everything's gonna, as long as we can get the last little bit of editing, and I've got one thing that I've got to find, but I think everything else just came out really nicely. And so hopefully we'll have it released by the end of this month or mid-February at the very latest. And that's only if technical problems, and I don't even want to talk about that, but
Yeah.
because but I think we'll have everything ready to where we should have it for sure available in February.
All right,
That's
maybe now
exciting.
Amazon will have to deliver them.
You're not able to see my picture. There's a problem. So no, that's
Okay. And the only other thing that I had was just to let everybody know that I know that the membership, that the login form that's on the website has either disappeared. For some people, it's disappeared. For some people, if their cookies are still viable, it's there, but they can't log in. But they discontinued the login form, and it's a plugin that goes directly with that it's an add-on for the plugin. And so we're looking for a new members only section plugin. If anybody has one on their website that they love, that's really user friendly, let me know. I've got 5 that I've kind of narrowed it down to. One's free, but it's the least user friendly of the batch. The others are a small fee, less than $200, and we can do that if we have to, but I'd like to see what we can do that isn't going to skyrocket after another year or so. So anyway, that's all I had.
Hi, Carl.
Hello, how are you?
Fine. Welcome.
Good to be here.
Okay, I think we're
So-
probably ready. Yeah.
So we got about 10 minutes. Should we give people either a 10-minute break or let them have 10 more minutes to log on? Since I think usually 10:30 is when we get our stuff rolling, or do we want to just jump into it?
I'm fine with jumping into it, but
Yeah.
it's me.
I'm good.
All right. Well, the good news is that our speaker is me, so there will be no issues with being on time. So, and what I'm going to discuss is polishing your manuscript, and basically how to tips on self-editing, because it seems like some people just either don't do it because they are scared to, or maybe don't think that, if you're hiring editors, maybe you don't think you should do it, and I definitely disagree. Or maybe it's just something you're not comfortable with, but it's something I am very comfortable with because my background is in newspapers, and a lot of that was as an editor. And my favorite parts, whether it was one of my stories or somebody else's, was taking something that was very good and making it excellent and ready to print. So I am going to see if I can share PowerPoint with everybody, so you don't have to just look at my talking head for the next little while. Let's see. Nope, I don't think I can share my screen. It says it's
Okay,
disabled.
let me see if I can. Let me make sure that I've got you set. I thought I had you set, but let me just see if I can make it where you. Okay, okay, now try again. I thought I had it set that
There we
way.
go. All right.
Is it going to work?
It should. Now, can I make it to where I don't have user error on my end? That's the question. Can everybody see a PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes. Yay.
Yay.
Let's see. Can I go in slideshow mode?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there you
All right. And then all right. Now I see what it's doing. Everybody else is over here. Excellent.
go. And I'm going to mute myself
All right.
and mute everybody but you. I'm going to mute myself. I would suspect that everybody should mute themselves if they can.
All right. So yeah, it looks like everyone's muted. So I'll go ahead and get started. This, title screen, polishing your manuscript, tips for self-editing with me. And who am I, and why should you care what I have to say? I have written professionally since 2004, and that is to say I have been paid to have my words in print, starting in college with my college newspaper at the University of Texas at Austin, the Daily Texan, and it was sports is where I got started, but eventually I worked my way up and I was the managing editor of 2 newspapers, including the Amarillo newspaper and then the one down in Kerrville before I went ahead and decided that writing fiction was just way more fun. Making up the facts is always better than trying to report accurately what other people tell you. And then I have, written 4 novels. 2 of them are going to be releasing this next year, and that's actually, speaking of facts, that's not quite accurate. I'm still finishing editing one, and the other one is not quite finished yet, but it will be at the end of the month. So, but 2 of them are out, and I definitely self-edited all of those before sending them to their copy edits to my 2 publishers. And I am the new president of the Texas High Plains Writers. So, I've been coming to these meetings, and I've absorbed all the other advice that we've gotten from folks. So hopefully some of that will make it into this presentation. Now for the disclaimer, your mileage may vary, which just basically means that, I put this together. It's mostly for contemporary works, particularly fiction, since that's what I write, but also nonfiction and true crime. I feel like it's all the, transferable. But if, let's say you're writing historical fiction, well, some of the things I'm going to talk about here will not translate because you're going to want to stick with, the conventions of whatever time period you're writing in. Did anybody speak or with contractions? What was the language like? So, you'll have to know your genre and know what you're writing and see what things I talk about today will be applicable. Hopefully for most of you, it'll pretty generally be stuff you can use. And language in the business of publishing evolves. So I'll be getting into a little bit some categories and definitions of editing that may not still be accurate because, people change, the definitions of things all the time. And, language, this is as I understand it today, but, the Merriam-Webster changes definitions all the time. Apparently, irregardless is now a word. I will strain to never use it, but hey, if it's in the dictionary, I suppose you can use it. And of course, if I have a character who says ain't, well, I'm going to go ahead and have him use it rather than not, even though ain't a word. Although I think that one is too, actually. So Pluto is not a planet, or maybe it is, who knows. All right, types of editing. I break them down into 2 groups, macro and micro. So macro editing would be developmental editing, substantive editing. Some people break those into 2 things, but basically that's getting your story, right, and not worrying about the language, copy editing, typos, punctuation, and all that. And then micro editing is the rest. It's line editing, copy editing, and proofreading, which I think are 3 separate things. Line editing and copy editing are oftentimes grouped into one, and then copy editing and proofreading are very similar. They just take place at 2 different stages, manuscript and then after it's been sent to layout. And so for my purposes, when I talk about polishing a manuscript, I'm talking about micro editing, which means, you have your beats, your structure, your scene, you've killed off all the darlings you need to, the paragraphs are pretty much, in the right order. So the developmental and substantive editing has been done, and agents, editors, and readers are going to love your story. You've got that all set. So now it's time to look at the language you're using, which is the line editing, and making sure that you're using that language correctly and you have all the facts straight. And even in fiction, you can have just in the backstory, a throwaway, they went to one college and then, 200 pages later, you reference another one that's a different place that they went. So, that would be a fact error, even though you're making up all the facts. Sometimes you make them up differently at different points in the story. I know because I've done it several times. And of course, another disclaimer, just because I'm giving you tips on editing your manuscript does not mean that you should ever self-publish or advocate for anyone else to publish your story without it being professionally copy edited. If you're working with a publisher, that means that they provide the copy editor and the layout. And in my experience, the proofing is often done by several folks, including you. You'll get a copy of the galleys or uncorrected proofs, whatever they call it, and you'll get a chance to look them over along with, your copy editor and usually your acquisition editor. And then if you're indie publishing, you'll be hiring the copy editor and or proofreader, depending on if you are laying it out yourself, or your proofreader might also just be like your significant other, best friend who works at a newspaper or whatever it is. But it's on you to do it, but you should hire a professional copy editor somewhere toward the end because, even if you are great at it, you will not catch everything in your own manuscript. That's, just kind of how it works. But why should you publish your own manuscript if you're just going to be hiring somebody else to catch all those typos and everything for you? In big bold type, nobody will ever care as much about your book as you do, and there is no, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. No matter how great of a team you have, if you're working with a publisher, or how much you love the folks that you outsource your work to, if you're indie publishing, it is your book, and you will have spent, depending on how quickly you write, anywhere from 3 months to a year or more working on this manuscript. If it's novel length, if it's a short story that can be done in a shorter time frame. I've written 2 short stories, and they've both been for the High Plains Writers Anthology. So I'm not sure if people who write multiple short stories a year and who make money off of it, I'm not sure how long it takes to do that. But either way, you spent the most time with it. It is your baby. And as much as other people love you, they will not love your manuscript as much as you do. So it is up to you to make sure it is exactly how you want it before it even gets to the copy editing stage. And if you're querying agents, or even if you have an agent and they're querying editors or whatever, however it's working for you, depending on if it's a small press or a big traditional press, your manuscript should be 90% ready, whether it's for sending out to agents or whenever your agent is going to send it out to acquisition editors of publishing houses. It's got to be close. If it's riddled with typos, and if you're saying, if you're trying to say should have and you're saying should of, HAVE versus OF, stuff like that. If you got some homonyms wrong, then most agents and most editors, unless it is absolutely a fantastic story, which I'm sure it is, but there's maybe 1 or 2 of those a year that are no doubters that go up for auction and sell for $1 million. Unless it's one of those, they're going to take a pass if it's not polished and pretty much there and ready to go into copy editing. Now, obviously, you'll get a developmental edit and all that stuff, but it should be very professional looking when they read it, even if there's story problems. So the way I think about it is your manuscripts are diamonds in the rough, and I'm not using the metaphor quite right when I do this, but as you enter the final editing stages, all of your manuscripts are gemstones that have the potential to really sparkle. But that happens after you get rid of all the unnecessary words that are surrounding the gemstone, which means that the bulk of polishing, as I'm defining it in this presentation, is deleting words. And so that would be like breaking up all of the rough around your diamond. But yeah, deleting words is the biggest part of polishing up a manuscript. If you've read other books on writing, that's always a major part of it. And in addition to getting rid of entire scenes and paragraphs and stuff like that, I referenced Stephen King's Killing Your Darlings earlier. It's said that you should be able to get rid of at least 10% of the words in your manuscript after you have all of your story complete when you're just looking at the language and the line editing, copy editing. So to put that in perspective, if you're trying to get to a $90,000 or not $90,000, yeah, that'd be great. A 90,000 word manuscript for an adult thriller like the ones I write, then your target should be at least 100,000 words for your manuscript. I can't get there, but I also work the opposite of most people, to where as I'm going through my developmental edits, I actually layer in things. So I start out, I always come up short, and then I layer in, and then once all that's done, then I start getting rid of the 10% of my words. But it's true that you really can do that, and it doesn't even feel like you're getting rid of a lot of words. If you get rid of a few words on every page, and then some pages you'll get rid of a lot of words, it just all adds up. And so that's what I mean by polishing. It's a long process, but you can search and delete for a lot of the words right off the bat, and maybe don't just blanket do it, don't find the word that 70 times or 700 times and just delete them all, because you're going to want, there's context and there's voice and there's things to look at. But that is probably the word you should search for first. You can almost always delete it, almost no matter what context you're in. And one thing I will caution people with is, don't just replace that with which just because you've heard that is a bad word. It's a 4-letter word, because you're not getting rid of the word, which is the goal when you're doing this, and B, a lot of people, when they do that, they misuse the word which, and they still don't need to use which. So if you look at the examples I have on here, PowerPoint, which is easy to use, is the best program for creating presentations. The word which is to be used, set off by commas and a parenthetical is how I was, the phrasing I was taught. But basically, it's whenever part of your sentence can be completely set off to the side. And if you were to delete that, it would still read fine. PowerPoint is the best program for creating presentations. I've added another piece of information that, can be taken out of the sentence and work just fine. So you couldn't say PowerPoint, that's easy to use, is the best program for creating presentations. That's just, grammatically incorrect nowadays. It probably wasn't, several years ago, but since I've been going to school, and definitely since I've, learned style and all that stuff, that's the correct way to do it. And if you have a sentence where you should be using that, if you need, you switch it to which, it's still incorrect and you still don't need the word. So if you go to the program, which I use to create presentations is PowerPoint, the which is incorrect, you would use the word that, and you could get rid of that word and be just fine. The program I use to create presentations is PowerPoint. Even though we speak in a certain way, and you may, if you were talking to me, you may read that sentence as I have it written there. You may say the program that I use instead of which I use, but either way, when you are polishing your manuscript, you're looking for words to delete, and that is one you can almost always get rid of. And another one that people say and that I use a lot, and then you actually read in a lot of stories, are called filter verbs. Saw, felt, heard, thought, smelled, tasted, and those are the main ones, and things that are like that. So if the characters see something happen, 9 times out of 10, something happened, and you can just tell me the thing that happened. A character is eating, they don't taste the bitter blackberries, the bitter blackberries accosted her taste buds. I switched that up to be an active voice, which we'll talk about later, but point being that you don't have to tell the reader that a character tasted something, especially if you're in either first person or limited third, which are the two most often used points of view. If you're in that character's head, then they are tasting it, so you don't have to tell the reader that the character's tasting it. That's redundant. Or if they see something happen, which is not a lot of what you do with prose, you're describing what's happening as a character sees it. You don't have to say that they saw it, because just tell me the thing that's happening. Exceptions would be for heard, maybe, or felt if the character is in the dark, or if they're hiding from someone like in a closet, and maybe they heard footsteps outside, or if they're groping around in the dark and they felt a fur coat in the closet or whatever have you. There are exceptions, and that's why whenever you're searching for words, you don't just automatically delete or replace. You may have to do it several hundred times. Lord knows this is a long process, but go through each time and see if it fits in context, and always account for voice. You may hear me say that a few times throughout this. Each character in their dialogue has a voice. You as an author have a voice. If it's a completely Southern fried character, maybe when they're talking, they use that 500 times, and they're always saying, I saw this and I heard that, especially if they're talking about, the gossip mill or whatever it is. There's context and reasons you might use these words, but if just in your narrative, in your prose, these are words that people tend to overuse and tend to not delete, either because they're have never been told that maybe they should, or most likely because they have read it in a whole bunch of other books and articles, and it doesn't seem like words that should be deleted. They don't seem superfluous, but they are, and your writing is stronger without the words. And that is the goal of polishing your manuscript, is making the language stronger. Let's see, others. Chose to or decided to. Generally speaking, if your character or narrative nonfiction maybe, or whatever, if they decide to do something or they choose to do something, you should just they're going to act like Nike and they're just going to do it. Instead of saying she decided to fight the dragon to the death, she fought the dragon to the death, because saying that they decided to or chose to means that they are going to do the thing usually. You can say if it's in the past, she decided to do this, but then check it out. Well, okay, then in that case, yes, you keep in, character X decided to do something, because that leads to them actually not doing it. But, most of the time, if you say, she had had enough and decided to fight back, generally speaking, she's about to fight back. So you can skip the decision making, unless that is, something that is important to the narrative. But I would say most of the time when people write it, they actually don't mean to write it, or they don't need it to be there. They are working out for themselves as they're writing. They are, it's kind of a choose your own adventure when you're writing your draft and you're navigating your choices and you're saying to yourself, I'm going to choose to do this, so I'm going to have the character choose to do this. When you're polishing, that's when you can take the decision making out of it and just get to the action. Let go of is something that we say all the time, and a lot of these things that I'm highlighting, just so you know, are things that I know that I do. And so if you find yourself writing these things, and if you want to disagree with me, feel free to disagree with me, but know that I'm not picking on anybody but myself, because these are things that I have taken notes of while I'm writing. And I read the sentence again, and my editor brain kicks in and goes, hey, I didn't need to say that. So I make a note of it, and then I have a file on my computer that, for my own self-editing tips and things that I know. These are the first things I go back and look for. And anytime I think I'm done with a manuscript, because these are my crutches. These are things that I write that I know I don't need to write, that I'm going to have to get rid of later. So let go of, you can just always find a stronger verb. If they didn't do it on purpose, maybe they fumbled their keys as they were trying to put them in the door because the murderer was right behind them. If it's something that falls, they can drop it, because, that's, if you drop something, it falls to the ground. Or there's a lot of other verbs. I'm sure that you could probably Google verbs that mean let go of or something like that, and you can get a whole list. But it's just, that's 3 words where you could use one, and fumbled and dropped are more interesting and stronger verbs. So your writing is stronger in 2 ways. You use less words, and you are using a stronger, more distinct verb. Noticed, if your character noticed something, that just means that something happened. So just tell me what happened. If it's a murder mystery, if you're Sherlock Holmes, his whole thing is noticing things and putting the pieces together. So there may be times when, you can keep that word in, but sort of like with chose to or decided to, generally speaking, as we're writing a draft, we are noticing things as we're seeing them. And then when you go back to polish your manuscript, you don't have to tell the reader that they noticed the thing, tell them that the thing was there. Took a step, we say that, but if you took a step, by definition, you stepped, or you did something even better, like you crept, you sprinted, you skipped. You can use padded if you must. Almost every book now uses that once or twice because there are so many different ways to say that you took a step. You should try to exhaust your options before using 3 words when you can use 1, because took a step is just not as strong a verb. What other ones? So was able to, and then blank whatever verb you want. Delete was able to, and just put the verb in past tense. So instead of the robber was able to escape, the robber escaped. So, you're using an infinitive when you can just use past tense, or if you're writing in present tense, which is the manuscript I'm currently working on. It's an action thriller, so I'm writing it in present tense. First time I'm doing this. I think it's turning out okay, but we'll see what everybody else thinks. But so instead of the robber was able to escape, the robber escaped or escapes. It doesn't sound as good in first person, so I would write something else. But you get the gist. Take that infinitive and just put it into the correct tense, and you can get rid of the words was able to. Who was? You can almost always get rid of those 2 words. Let's see, the officer who was killed becomes the fallen officer. The criminal who was robbing the store becomes the criminal robbing the store. Those are just, if you search for those 2 words as a phrase, you're going to be able to, drop a lot of those words out of your manuscript. Other words you probably already know that you should delete. Adverbs, that's something that everybody who talks about editing hits on the head, and it's, we use them when we speak. People in dialogue, if it feels more natural to use it, by all means keep it in. I'm all for dialogue sounding as natural as possible, even if it's grammatically incorrect. I know, and I noticed it while I was working in the newspaper here, and I don't know when I noticed it exactly, but I know it just hit me all at once that people, when they mean to say, there are 8 things I don't like about this budget proposal. If they were at a city council meeting, they'd say there's 8 things, short for there is, and obviously that's grammatically incorrect, but that is how people speak, at least around here. And I started listening for it on like national newscasts. It seems like it's an American way that the language is moving. People say, there's, and then they might be talking about multiple things when they might have wanted to say there are. I'll get to contractions in a minute, but my suspicion is that people, when they speak, they want to use contractions because it's easier, and that's just how our brains are wired for whatever reason it is. So that's a way to use a contraction, even if it's grammatically incorrect, and it just slips in there. And unless you are looking for it while you're editing a story, like I was whenever I noticed it. Hello? Okay, I thought I heard somebody. But yes, so that's so anyway, that was a long tangent to say that people use adverbs when they speak. So if it's more natural to keep that in dialogue, I'm all for that. But in your prose, you almost never need it. And I have some adverbs listed there. They end in ly, they're the ly words, but also very, is a big one. Just, can be used as an adverb, and you want to get rid of that. And a lot of times, if you're going to use an adverb, make it a fun one and a memorable one. Like something is, infuriatingly is one, maddeningly are ones that I keep in sometimes, because I think that's, pairing that up with your verb sometimes is more fun. And I like it better than trying to come up with a verb maybe that people haven't heard of. I don't like people to have to look up a word in the dictionary if they're reading my book, but I write thrillers, so taking them out of the story for any reason, to me, it works against what I'm trying to do. But I know people who write other types of fiction, that's part of it. Some people, that's part of the reason you might read a certain genre or literary fiction is to learn a new word, and And if your reader has to go and look it up, well, that's, one of the reasons they read your book. So like I said, your mileage may vary, but for me, if I have to really break out that thesaurus and really look at the very last, entries in that thesaurus, sometimes the adverb has to be used, but just make it a really fun one if you're going to do that. To be, everybody, you don't want that verb to be in there if it doesn't have to be. Was, I mentioned earlier, has been, had been, was being, had been being. And if you're using, if you read a sentence and you read the words and say out loud, had been being, your brain is probably going to go, what did I just say? And why did I just say it? So, that's, we'll get into reading your work later, but, and are they all grammatically correct? 100%. But there's usually a way to rewrite that sentence to where you can take all that stuff out. And one of the easiest ways is to put, is to rewrite a sentence to be an active voice, which is another slide or two. Your sentence is almost always stronger without it. And like I said, for dialogue, to keep it from sounding stilted, and if the character is speaking that way, you're going to want to keep it in. And that goes back to reading it. If you're reading a piece of dialogue and your brain says that's not how I would say it, and it wants the word just in there, as long as the character's not saying it every single sentence, or if they are, you have to really overdo it to make it almost a caricature, make it a thing that they do. One of my characters in one of the books I wrote, he's real, he's definitely like he's a pipeline worker, so he's kind of a bro, and so he says bro, man, dude to start off almost every sentence every time he talks to his friend. And I think most of us probably, especially if you skew on the younger side, or if you went to college, or if you have kids, know what I'm talking about. It's a way people speak, and so that character, that is one of the things that he's talking when a sentence starts out that way, and I don't have to use dialogue tags. If you're doing that, then that is one thing, and by all means do that. But if all of your characters are saying the word just, 3 times a sentence, then that's problematic.
Easy, Bo.
All right. So as I said, I was going to get to read every sentence for active voice. And this is something they teach you for sure in journalism school. I imagine if you're an English lit major or other stuff, they probably talk about it. But this is one that, from my first day on campus, we were told to make sure to write everything in active voice, which, the simple way to put that is someone does something. The one classic example, especially if you're in the PR world, you never have your client say, I made mistakes, because that's active voice. You say mistakes were made, because that's passive, which means that they're not necessarily owning up to whatever mistake, quote, was made. But that's the classic example is I made mistakes is active voice. Someone, me, did something, made mistakes, versus mistakes were made, which, is something had happened, something was being happened. It's a lot more words, and it is not as direct. Now, one thing that'll happen if you use a whole lot of active voice all the time is your sentences will almost always start with pronoun, I, he, she, or the proper noun, the name of the character. Depending on who your editor is, they may say, hey, that's getting boring and repetitive, and that is true. So there will be times when it'll feel natural to break that up and not always go active voice. You'll also sometimes hear people say that kind of language is staccato, which, in the crime fiction world is fine, because, that's a stylization that's used a lot. If you're writing literary fiction, that could be seen as an insult from what I gather. So as I said, your mileage may vary, but when you're going back to polishing your manuscript, unless there's a reason for it to be in passive voice, try to always write your sentences in active voice, because it cuts down on the number of words in your manuscript. And if you're writing a narrative, if you're writing for plot, then it propels your narrative forward more quickly and keeps your readers engaged in turning the pages. Some examples, just to think about, and this is something that you'll eventually just do as you're reading after you do this enough. But a passive sentence would be, Julie was bitten by the dog, which is 6 words. The active version of that is the dog bit Julie. Or if you think about a headline, dog bites man. That's one of the classic ones you learn in school. But the point is that the first one was 6 words and the active version was 4. And so that's taking out 30 of your words. And if you do that throughout an entire manuscript, that adds up. And that's how you get rid of that, those 10,000 words if you have a 100,000 word manuscript. Looking for redundancies, this is one that takes a little more than just searching and deleting. And it doesn't always come as easy as just looking for passive voice. Because some of them can be hidden. An example is sat down. Well, you're almost always going to sit down, even though we say sit down. If you're going to sit, the motion is almost always in a downward motion. So you can just say someone sat. You're going to search, don't just blanket search and delete, but that's one that we would always say sit down. Everyone's been told by their teacher to sit down, or at least I was, because I was a kid who didn't always listen. But you don't have to have that word down in there, and it's only one word, and 90% of people won't even care that the word's in there. But for the 10% who do, that is a flag to them that perhaps your manuscript might have had one more edit in it. And then sometimes we will describe similar actions in a series because it sounds good, and maybe because if we were watching a movie, somebody might be doing all of these things simultaneously. So an example might be she closed her eyes, nodded, and exhaled. And this is another one that I do a ton because, I am, it's sometimes called stage directing. I'm watching the scene in my head and I'm just writing down everything every person does. But if you write that, closes your eyes, nodded, and exhaled, someone might actually do that. But if you write that, it's just, it's a longer sentence than it needs to be. And the reader already knows that if someone is feeling a certain way, you're showing rather than telling, which is step 1, which is great. But you don't have to say that they did all those things. You can choose one that you feel is the strongest, most emblematic of whatever emotion they're trying to show. So I would probably go with exhale because I think it's a more fun word. It's got an X in there, but you could choose any of those and it would get across the emotion you're trying to get across in less words. And you're going to probably be doing that around either before or in the middle of dialogue. So you'll be able to get to the dialogue more quickly. And, generally speaking, that's where you're going to want to have your characters describe, what's happening, why they're feeling, however they're feeling. They're going to tell the story to their friend, get the exposition out there, but you're going to want to get to that dialogue more quickly while still giving the reader a sense of whatever the character's feeling as they're describing it. But you don't have to use all 3 of those. You just pick one. And use contractions. This is another one that might be controversial depending on what you write. If you're writing very professional nonfiction, I can imagine that contractions might be very, very much frowned upon. Verbatim direct quote. But I think if you're writing contemporary fiction or narrative nonfiction, or a type of nonfiction that just isn't quite so serious, I guess, for lack of a better word, contractions are what we're used to reading, because if you read the newspaper every day, journalists use contractions. We speak using contractions, as I spoke about earlier. So contractions, obviously, they eliminate words. They also, most of the time, make the text easier to read because we are able to get through the sentence more quickly. And in dialogue, you can even contract more things than you would have. Shouldn't have and wouldn't and all the good Southern things that we all say. That's fine in dialogue and usually preferred to things like you might see shouldn't, like putting an A at the end of the T there, or stuff like that. Oughta, OTTA, shoulda, woulda, coulda, with the A's at the end. Depending on how you like to write, how you like to read, you might do that instead. I think for a general audience, the rule is to do it like I have there on the screen. But either way, especially in dialogue, make sure that to use those contractions, because I catch myself when I'm reading dialogue out loud sometimes. We're taught in school not to use the contractions a lot. So if you just go along and doing it, but if you say the word, you're like, oh, hey, I don't know a person, in my circle of friends who would say it that way. Well, then rewrite it to sound the way you would say it. You can also, this is also a good trick to help find those to be verbs. If you find yourself turning this will eliminate words into this will eliminate words, then you can take that and go, oh, I can even shorten that more into this eliminates words. So again, you've gotten rid of some words there, and you've made it stronger and more direct sentence. And like I said, exceptions, if you're writing serious formal nonfiction, this may work. Historical fiction, if you're writing at a time period where contractions weren't a thing or were frowned upon, let's say that you're writing historical nonfiction and your character that's speaking, or whose character who said you're in is, of a higher class, and the lower class is the class that uses contractions, well, then obviously you're going to make that distinction. And this whole time, while you're looking for all these words to get rid of, you're also still going to be looking for inconsistencies, the character's physical attributes, details in the backstory, what college they went to, like I said earlier, that sort of thing. And cliches, because we all use them, especially in first drafts, because cliches are cliches for a reason, because we say them a lot, and they may even be true. But if you use them a lot in your writing, it's no bueno. And yes, you should have caught these things in previous edits. But guess what? They are still waiting in your manuscript when you get to this point. They're still going to be waiting when they go to copy edits, and they're still going to be waiting when somebody's reading the book, the final product, because nobody gets rid of them all. And if you claim to have done it, then you should be making more money than whatever you are, because writers will pay you a lot. So how to do all of this with your own writing, because it is true, it is a scientific fact that, editing what you yourself have written is very difficult. Your eyes have seen these words, these sentences, these paragraphs, these scenes, these chapters in this manuscript for, years maybe, which is why it is your baby. But you cannot let the fact that it's difficult be your reason to skip self-editing and just ship the manuscript off to your copy editor. During developmental edits, that's a different thing. I definitely have, written the end, even though I don't actually write the end, but I finished the sentence, poured myself a drink, and hit, send off to my editor and said, please tell me the things that are very wrong with this manuscript. And during developmental edit, that's what they're there for, is to tell you what story things need to be fixed. But not self-editing, not polishing up your own manuscript before you send it to a copy editor is not the same thing, and it is not going to do anybody any favors. It is going to get your copy editor annoyed with you, because if they are making a comment and they should be making changes every sentence, maybe, if that's the way they do it. But if they're doing the same comment 5 times on a page, every page, it's going to hurt your working relationship, I would think. But also, they're going to just stop seeing all of the mistakes because they're so used to seeing them, which is one of the reasons why it's hard to edit your own stuff. So how do you edit your own material? One of the easiest things you can do is change the font and go from double space to single space, assuming you're writing your manuscript double spaced. If you're not, then my suggestion would be that you do so, because that is the standard, and that is how everybody receives and edits manuscripts at traditional publishing houses. And I imagine, if you outsource to a professional editor, they also ask for it in that way. So you want, and in other words, you're going to make it look more like a book rather than a manuscript. Make it look like something familiar, make it look like a book page. And as a reader, you will eventually, if you write enough, find a lot of these things I'm talking about. You will notice when a book has not been very well edited. You will find the to be verbs, you will find passive voice when it should be active, that sort of thing, naturally, because you've done this enough times. And so you can trick your brain a little bit by making your manuscript look like a book page, and you will then read it more as a reader than as the writer of the words. Print it out. And this does cost. So if finances prevent you from doing it, I totally understand that. But if you have the means, print out a copy of your manuscript after you change the formatting, and then it really becomes like a book. That just makes it even stronger brain trick. And you will read it and you will find these mistakes more easily. And then sometimes, I print mine out a couple times throughout the editing process. Read it out loud. Everyone says this because it is absolutely true. And when you read something out loud, reading and writing use similar parts of the brain, but not 100% the same. So reading it out loud activates a little different parts. So you will, it'll feel more new than if you're just reading it silently in your head. If that's how you think. Apparently not everybody hears words when they think. They think with emotion. I don't know how that works. I have a narration in my head, but not everybody does, apparently. My secret sauce, whenever I am editing and polishing up a manuscript, is to do all of the above, but then as I'm reading it aloud, I touch each word with my pen. And, what that does is it activates even a different part of your brain, because that's tactile, that's a physical movement, as opposed to just reading and being all in your head. And it makes you read slower, which for me, and I don't know if anybody else has this problem, but I tend to miss words whenever I'm writing. And I don't know if it's because I go back and delete one too many words and don't fill in the whole rest of the sentence or whatever it is. But I have to read my manuscripts for missing words. In the middle of a sentence, at the beginning of a sentence, wherever in the sentence, I just, I miss words. So that's the reason I do this, is because, I thought to myself, well, hey, if I go ahead and, if I have to touch every word, my brain will notice if there's a word that should have been there that I didn't actually physically touch with my pen. So that I would recommend you try it. If it doesn't work for you, if you feel like it's frustrating for whatever reason and it's not doing you any good, then by all means forget everything I just said. But if you're looking for a way to try to catch even more stuff in your own manuscript, I would recommend trying that, because it works well for me in terms of not only finding the missing words, maybe that's not your problem, but it makes me read more slowly so that my brain does not skip over whatever problems that I would skip over if I were just reading on a screen. And then, so congratulations, you've done all of the things I just talked about. Now you get to go back, read your manuscript again, and look for spelling, grammar, and usage. And, that's a totally different copy editing class that, we could discuss, all day. But you all know grammar, you all know punctuation, that sort of thing. As writers, I'm assuming, if not, then, if you're interested in learning, there are copy editing classes you can take that are just on that kind of stuff. Yeah, you'll have to go over your manuscript one more time after doing everything I just talked about, looking specifically for that stuff. Now, you'll find a lot of this while you're doing all the other stuff I talked about. If you're going to rewrite a sentence in active voice and you misspelled one of the words, well, you're probably not going to misspell the word again. You're probably going to fix that while you're doing it. But you're still going to have to go back and find the ones you didn't find the first time. Use your favorite editing software by all means. I use Grammarly. For some reason, it thinks the way I think, and I like it. But I guess there's Hemingway's another one. There's, I don't know. There's a lot of them, and you may have a favorite. If you don't have a favorite, ask your buddy. Ask another writer. You'll find someone who has a favorite editing software, in addition to whatever comes with Word or Pages or whatever word processor you use. Use both. Use all of the above, because they are going to find a lot of basic stuff. Things that they will not find, that you're going to have to find yourself. Homonyms. And this is one of the reasons I like Grammarly, because you can make the settings where it's going to find a lot of the stuff. But words that sound the same but are spelled differently. It's just one of those. It's going to happen. You probably have there, and there nailed, but there are definitely a lot of homonyms out there waiting to bite you in your manuscript, especially if you write 100,000 words. They're just statistically, there are going to be some that you thought you wrote correctly and you didn't. Words missing a letter or space or a combination of letter and a space that, when written incorrectly, somehow make a new, unrelated, yet correctly spelled word, like dropping the N off of then becomes the, where and were. And you can even type we are, and if you miss that space and drop the E off, it becomes where. So, standard spell check is not going to catch that. So that's why some of those, more enhanced editing softwares like Grammarly or Hemingway or those kind of things, they actually read the sentence there. The AI is pretty good and they'll catch a lot of that stuff, but they will not catch all of it. Missing words for me, like I said, that's a huge one. Other ones that won't catch a lot of times are usage, a word that even if we say it one way, and whenever we're just talking amongst our friends, everybody misuses a word just because the language is always changing. And maybe, if used to be, if you said irregardless, it was incorrect, but now it's a word, which, if regardless and irregardless are both words, I don't know how that works, but apparently it does. The point being is that you're going to have to read it and not rely just on those softwares to do it. So congratulations, you've polished and you've gone back one more time looking for the copy editing stuff, your language and your typos, and now you're ready to send your manuscript to copy editing. And then you'll get one last chance to find that typo that's waiting for you when you read your proofs after it's been typeset or been sent to layout, depending on the terms you use. And that's great. And the first time I did this, I'm like, I'm so glad I had this last chance because I'll get to find all the things I missed before. I did not do a good enough job of self-editing the first time. And that's the reason why this, was top of mind. This entire subject was top of mind for me because luckily it was with a small press and they knew it was my first novel. And so when I sent back all the changes, they were like, hey, this is too many. And I was like, I freaked out. And I said, please make the changes because I would really hate for this book to go out with these many things that I don't like about the manuscript. But you can't make just a ton of changes at that point. Now, if you're doing it yourself, you can make all the changes you want. But if a traditional publishing contract is what you're after, or if you're working with some freelancers, my understanding is that there's a threshold for the amount of changes you can request after it's been sent to layout before you have to pay them a fee because they have to pay a fee to make that many changes depending on how their whole process works. But yeah, sometimes it's numerical. I think my last contract was up to 10%. If you request changes that are more than 10% of the manuscript being changed, then you have to pay the cost for them to reset those pages with the printer. So, it can be a big deal, which is another reason why, this whole self-editing, the entire presentation I just gave can be important because if you get to that end step and they're like, hey, it's going to cost you $200, buddy, if you want to make all these changes, do you want to spend that money? Do you have that money to spend? Or are you going to put a book out there that just has that many things that you don't like? And they can be flat wrong, or they can just be things that like passive voice versus active voice, things that just would be better even if they're not grammatically incorrect. Like usually if it's a flat typo, yeah, they're not gonna balk at that. But if you just want to rewrite a paragraph because you don't like how passive the language is, hey, sorry, dude, like you had a whole lot of time to get that done. And that's what they'll tell you. And it's not fun to hear. I got very lucky that it was with a small press and it didn't cost them much money or any money. And they said, hey, but next time you publish with us, you're not going to get to do that. And, I got that lesson pretty quick. My two favorite resources for language and for helping you to edit your own work. This one came out, I guess 2 years ago now, 2019, Dreyer's English. If you haven't heard about this book, it's the copy chief at Random House. He wrote, and it really is, it's not a writing memoir. It is truly like a style guide, but it is actually very funny. And anybody who's read it will know what I'm talking about. But it's very practical advice. It's very good advice, and some stuff is like specifically for book length publications that I wouldn't have thought of. And whenever this presentation gets put online on the website, and I guess probably through Facebook or however Kim's going to do it. Those are links to the Amazon page to where you can actually go ahead and buy those things. But Dreyer's English, I have a copy on my desk. Read through it once and then highlight things that you like, and then go back and use it as you're writing and as you're editing. And then the Elements of Style, if you haven't heard of that book, then let me welcome you to the wonderful world of Strunk and White, because their book on usage is one of the best. The fourth edition was 1999, so it's been around for a long time, but it talks about everything I just talked about, only does it way better. And you didn't have to listen to me talk, so it's even better in that regard. But if you do not have a copy of the Elements of Style on your writing desk, I highly recommend it. I got my first one in high school, believe it or not. It was a graduation gift, but obviously we used the ones in class. But my teacher was kind enough to buy me a fresh one and write a little something and everything like that. But that's how long this book's been around, and it stood the test of time. So if you get those two books as your desk references, and you use them while you're editing your own work, you will be all the better for it. And that is the end of my presentation. So now comes the time when you get to tell me what I got wrong, and go ahead and tell me, let's have a discussion about things that I missed, or things that you don't think I got right, because that's the great thing about language, is that it is always changing, and there is always more than a dozen ways to skin a cat. So any questions?
Okay, first of all, I want to say that you did a good job. Thank you.
Well, I
And-
appreciate that, Matt.
Yeah. And one thing, whenever you said read it out loud, what I do is Word now will read it to you. So I read along with it while I'm doing that, and I catch a lot of stuff doing it that way too. And
Yeah, I've never exercised that for whatever reason. I maybe just because I've been reading it out loud myself for so long, I don't think about it. But yeah, I can see how that'd be great. And I imagine hearing it in a different voice than you are used to hearing, whether it's internally or auditory, can only help you hear your own work in a different way. So yeah, very good.
that's what I
Okay, Ricky, talk a bit more about editing character arc, character development, character.
Yeah, so that's that is something that I am learning how to do more, because as I said, I came from newspapers to where you have feature articles that maybe have a character arc, but you can only have so much space to do it. And so that's why this presentation, I did focus a lot more on language and usage and line editing, because that's my favorite thing to do. And that's, if I have a specialty in writing, that's what it is. But yeah, character development, one thing, that I always have to look for is, I say, I have a bit of backstory, and you want to dribble it in as you go. I oftentimes, and I'll wake up in the middle of the night, or, it'll keep me from falling asleep, I'll have described something in the backstory one way, and then I'll want to write another piece of backstory, and they don't quite mesh. So yeah, that is, I actually have gotten to where I have to do that. I have to rectify the situation immediately. I have to wake up in the morning. Sometimes I'll take a note if I'm really tired and I want to make sure I don't forget it, but go back and make sure that all of my backstory and all of, my character, where they started the story and where they end the story, and how the backstory fits into all that. I have to make sure that all lines up before I even start adding new words. Do I write more slowly now? Absolutely. But I like the way that my drafts come out better. But character arcs are hard. And what I would say is that's where plotting can help out. If you write by the seat of your pants, you probably have to do a lot more going back and make the face match the behind, as sometimes people say, but make sure that the front end of your story matches up and the character arc matches up with how you ended it. Because when you end your story, usually that's where, you're really cooking and you're really going and you love it and you find a great way to end it. But if you go back and read the first half of your book, did you set up the character to evolve the way that they did? And that's where a great developmental editor is. They're worth their weight in gold. There's some stories I've written where I didn't need as much because they were more action thriller and more murder mystery, and there's not as much character in it. But for my last release, where character and how the plot and the character mix together is such a huge part of that overall story. If I hadn't had, and a lot of Jody Thompson at Fox Press, because she's done presentations here and she's worked with us, that story would not have been nearly as good without her. And so the sequel that I just sent into her needed even more work than the last one. And that's, find yourself a good developmental editor, because you need it. That's the one where even sometimes before you send it out to agents or do whatever you want with your manuscript, find someone who can do that for you. Pay them unless they offer to do it for free. because that's how you're getting the good stuff. Because my mother loves me and I love her, but she's not going to tell me if my character arc really stinks, because A, she doesn't know how to look for it, and B, she's going to tell me she loves it anyway. So
Thanks.
No problem, Rick.
One thing that I started doing, just as kind of my last, well, not always my last run through, but one of the editing things that I do is I look at my whole picture of each page as an image, and make sure, I try really hard to make sure that all of my paragraphs don't start with the same 3 words, because I find, especially with this last one that I'm working on, because it's in first person, it's the first one I've done in first person, and there's a whole lot of I did, whatever. And so I'm trying really hard to vary my sentence structure so that each paragraph does not start with the same 3 words.
Yes, whenever I talk about writing for active voice, that is something that I also have to make sure that I go back and look for. And then sometimes it's as easy as starting off your sentence with some sort of parenthetical,
Yes.
which obviously if you're writing, technically perfect, you wouldn't do that. But yeah, you can't start every sentence with I did this, I did that. He did this, he did that. Yeah, no, I get into that a lot, and that's another thing I probably should have put that in there. In addition to that, if you look at your pages as a whole and don't zoom out even where you can't even read the words, make sure the paragraphs aren't all the same length.
Yes.
And that's a pacing thing, and that's something that falls somewhere in between developmental editing and line editing. That's and it's one of those where, generally speaking, eventually you'll just write that way and it won't become an issue. But for a lot of, especially early on in your writing career, or if you're just stuck in a rut or in the middle of your book because the middle is just a slog, yeah, you'll find a pattern, and all your paragraphs will all be 4 sentences of about the same length, and it'll just look very uniform. So yeah, you can look for that.
Yeah.
I make a conscious effort in the way I write is I have shorter sentences interspersed in there, 1 or 2 at a time, to really emphasize something. And I think I may have even developed that as a way to make sure I don't do the other, because it is easy to fall into. But yeah, that's a great piece of advice. Zoom out and look at just your page and see how the pages physically look. And I did a presentation last year on picking up the pace. And that is another thing I think I mentioned there too, was to make sure that, your sentences vary in length and your paragraphs vary in length. And, I wrote newspapers for so long that, paragraphs are 1 sentence. If you had a paragraph that was more than 1 sentence, it's because you were writing some big flowery feature. But if you're just writing a news story, your paragraphs are all 1 sentence. So, but if you're writing prose, your paragraphs can't all be in 1 sentence. So.
And you could take this a step farther.
Yeah, very, very, very good.
Look at the length of your chapters. Sometimes writers make every chapter the same length. Try to vary the chapter.
And I have to do that a lot because, when you write faster paced stuff and you write like thrillers and some mysteries, you're always trying to move on to the next scene. So you might get to where every chapter is, 2 pages. And so, no, you have to slow it down sometimes and make a chapter 5 pages or 10 pages. With the manuscript I'm working on right now, I've set up a structure that I'm sticking to where I have 3 characters all, close third person, and I'm rotating in a very, a pattern that I'm not breaking. So I definitely found myself getting into a pattern to where they are all feeling like the same length, and I had just unknowingly, my brain had developed, okay, well, if you're going to have 3 characters all rotating, all coming back at the same time, your chapters should all be the exact same length. And I was cutting them off at the same place. And it's, whenever I went back and looked, and I actually did what Kim said, I zoomed out to make sure to see whether or not I was doing it. And sure enough, I had. So then whenever the action started picking back up, I made sure to cut a few of them off, a little shorter, and then have some that I stayed in the character a little longer, but broke up, had some scene breaks instead of chapter breaks. So, but yeah, it's, naturally, I think people and writers are, as much as we may hate math, we fall into the same kind of mathematical patterns that, that the physical world dictates. So making sure to look for that is a big part of it.
Rick, I'm a nonfiction writer, so I really appreciated the things you went over. When you said print it out, what I started doing, since I'm an indie author, I go ahead and get a proof copy from Amazon or KDP real quick. I can get a proof copy. My books are about 360 pages long. I can get a proof copy for $10. That includes shipping. And
oh, wow.
That is so much easier than printing out the pages. I'm seeing what it looks like, and you're going to just catch mistakes you don't otherwise. The only trick on that is, well, Amazon, you have to have a cover. But so what I do is I just go fake a cover. Amazon has their cover template. And on the book I'm working on right now, my cover designer has already designed the front page, but he did not do the spine or the back because I'm not ready yet. So I faked it. It doesn't look very professional, but I faked it, and Amazon was happy, and they sent me my proof copy that I had some complicated typesetting to do in there, and I changed the way I was doing it because of the way it looked in print. But also I'm getting ready to get a second proof copy so I can go do some of this editing like what you're talking about, putting your eyes on it and reading it out loud and catching stuff. So anyway,
that's very affordable.
Yeah, for 10 bucks, it makes life so much easier.
And I'm glad that you brought something like that up, because I have not yet indie published anything, and I say that because I think inevitably I'm going to want to, because it seems like something I want to at least try and see how it works. But my books have all been with small presses, so they take care of all that. So I actually had no idea how much it might even cost to get that. But for $10, if you can mock up a quick cover and just have them send that to you, that seems like something that, you would have every author want to do. And that's before you get your actual advanced reader copies and all that stuff. That's great that they do that for so cheap. That's amazing. Like, I can't go down to Kinko's and get that done. Not for $10.
Well, and if your book is less pages, it's going to cost you less. And on this book is 20 pages bigger than my previous one. And when I got it, I said, oh, this does not feel good in my hand. It just feels so much bigger. I was surprised at what 20 pages made in the way this book feels in my hand. So I've cut 20 pages because I don't like the way it feels in my hand. And so
yeah, and that physical, the way the book physically feels, sometimes it's, if you're not imagining it being a book, if it's kind of, it's just this thing that you're working on, a manuscript and a Word document. Some of you may know Taylor Moore. He's another thriller writer here in Amarillo, and he, it's finally sort of a public thing. His first thriller is going to come out with William Morrow, one of the big five, later on this year in August. And he's had a really long. I'm gonna try as president to have him do a presentation in the fall, because he'll be one of the people that's worked with a true big five publisher who's gonna have a big book. I mean, they're planning on making it one of the big books of the year. in the crime fiction world. So it's going to be great to hear from him. But, those of you who know him know he's been working on this book for, maybe up to 5 years, depending on when you consider him having started it. And he's gone through several revisions. But one thing that his agent had him do before it even got to the editor, that it was with David Highfield, was one of the big editors at William Morrow, is he had to add, it was at that point he was talking word count, but I think he went from 72,000 to around 90,000, which is the sweet spot for a thriller. He had to add that many words, not mostly, but in part because the agent knew that the editor would want, then the publisher would dictate that his hardcover would have to feel heavy. It would have to have some heft to it. And so they needed that many more pages because a really thin hardback feels different and feels, not flimsier, but feels cheaper than, a hardback that, like a John Grisham novel or a Stephen King novel that's really thick. And so that was part of the mix for them because that was the marketing side. They had a huge marketing arm there at the Big Five. And so that was a big part of it. So, it's great that, when an author thinks about that, even if they're not with the Big Five, because it's true. My first book, Deep Background, came out with Black Rose Writing, and they have a very standard book size for all of their books, almost no matter how long it is. And they do that for business reasons. It's much easier for them to manage everything because they publish a lot of books. They publish as many books as a major publisher does. They just do everything on kind of a smaller scale. And so I could probably request a different size, but I didn't know to. So yeah, it was sort of a short novel, and it was the big 6x9, so it felt flimsy. Fox Press, on the other hand, takes a lot more care with that stuff. They publish maybe a dozen books a year, however many they publish. So they put a lot more time into thinking about that. Like the Big Five imprints do, like William Morrow publishes probably the same amount of books, but HarperCollins or whoever owns them publishes, 500 a year, whatever it is. But anyway, Fox Press's novel that came out, it was a smaller size and the cover was more textured and it was a better physical product, which is very cool. And so to experience those two different things was excellent. But yeah, I agree. If you find that whenever you print out your physical book, it doesn't feel the way you want it to feel, that would be really great to be able to just say, well, I guess I need to cut out 20 pages and be able to do that before publication. But yeah, that's a great thing to think about. Another reason why getting one of those, bound galleys made really early. That's very cool.
Well, and I sell two paperbacks to the Kindle, which has surprised me, and sometimes I'll sell 3 times more paperbacks than the Kindle.
Yeah.
So.
Rick, say, this will be my last question, but say a little bit about your best way to, what you found to be your best way to find echoes.
And see, that was, there are definitely subjects I left out of this presentation. My best way is whenever I read it out loud. That's whenever my ear hears it. Now, my style, I use and I like using assonance and consonants and some alliteration, but that just comes naturally when I write. So I have to be careful. I have to take some of that out. Now that's not necessarily exactly what you were talking about, but echoes, I think, as Rick's probably talking about, would be using not only the same word in the same sentence or the same paragraph, sometimes using derivations of the same word a couple times. And then, like I said, sometimes I use words that that almost rhyme, like the assonance and the consonants. But yeah, I find whenever I say it and I hear it is whenever I catch it. But that's not something that I catch naturally. That a lot of times comes out during the copy editing process. The copy editor will circle it, or if leave comments, if they're tracking changes, and be like, hey, was this on purpose or was this not on purpose? Or they might just say the word echo or whatever. Now, I was always good at finding it in other people's writing in a news story, especially like in for those of you who've been in journalism or have laid out a newspaper in headlines, using the same word in a headline is a big problem sometimes, and that's where, we don't call that echoing, but you pointed out if you have 3 headlines that all have the same sort of verb in it or whatever. I was always very great at catching that in other people's writing, but in my own, yes, echoes are something that I'm not great at, which is probably why I didn't put it in the presentation, because I don't have a really great way to catch that. That's usually the copy editor is the one who catches that, and part of that is because my writing style is to have a little bit of lyricism in there. So it's but you can definitely border on almost making it long form poetry, and that's not what you're doing if you're writing a thriller. That's just but if you're writing long form poetry, I'm sure that that's a great skill to have. But everybody has their ticks, and that's not one that I'm great at finding. So but yeah, thanks for bringing it up. That is something, if you're not already looking for it, you should. But yeah, I guess whenever I hear it, sometimes I catch it, but my copy editors do a great job of pointing out whenever I use the same word too many times.
And I found that my critique group is really not, that they have no problems pointing that out to me. So that's very helpful if you've got a group that can read. Yeah, if you've got a group that can read your stuff a little at a time and just say, hey, watch out, you keep saying, that you keep using this word, and sometimes it doesn't mean what you think it means.
Yeah, well, and that's something that I didn't put in here that I should have is it's very good, whether or not you figured out you're on your own or someone points it out to you, to know what your weaknesses are, and to ask people who you trust, who are hopefully not blood relatives, unless they happen to be, like New York Times bestsellers. If you're related to Jodie Thompson, by all means, ask her. But to have somebody you trust who's also a writer who will tell you and call you out on that kind of stuff, and hopefully in a nice way. But yeah, like that is something that every writer needs, is a group of friends who, and even if it's not a formal critique group, even if it's, I've had people just Facebook message me and say, hey, can I send you this Word document, and will you let me know if I'm doing this? Because I usually can't find that in my own writing. And if you tell people to look for something specific, whether it's in a beta read, whether it's in your critique group, that makes the feedback that much better. To send it out to your beta readers and say, hey, tell me what you think. That's what you do with your family members and those kind of people. But if you're sending out to beta readers or critique group, ask them like, hey, well, and they can be, let me know what you think, but please let me know if you think the character arc is good, like Rick was talking about. Another one, hey, I'm going to send this to you. Would you please let me know if I, have, passages where I have a lot of echoes, because I know I don't catch that, and I that's something, that's a crutch I have. So that's always a great strategy. Now, how do you find those people? You have to live life and connect with people through the Texas High Plains Writers or whatever other groups. But when you find them, that is, because you have to reciprocate. Now, don't go asking and not giving, but finding a good network of people who you can all help each other is, invaluable. And everybody, even if it's not formally, every writer I know has a group where that happens, even if it's just they reach out a couple times, on Facebook, say, hey, I just wrote this. Am I doing this? What do you think of this? And that's the great thing about social media and the virtual stuff we can do now, is that you don't have to be in the same physical place, because, back, 10, 20 years ago, that's just how it had to be. You had to be in the same place. That's where colleges came in real handy. But after that, then it's a little different. Let's see. So it's 11:38. Do we usually try to wrap these up around noon or before? I can't quite remember what the schedule usually says.
Usually before, if we can, but we've got a little bit of time if somebody wants to, if there's more questions or anything. Anyone?
Anybody else have anything they wanted to talk about?
Oh, I guess I do.
Okay.
Because I, at our last board meeting, said, sure, I'll do what I can to find us programs. So if anybody has any suggestions, a wish list of speakers you'd like to have, send them my way. I will reach out to them. you know, for all of my faults, I'm not shy about asking people to show up and do something. So,
and I have a few folks that I'll talk about at the board meeting, but I have a few folks in mind who I'll suggest, and I can reach out to them, and if we have to kind of do it by committee, at least this first time, to get some people in the pipeline, that is what it is. But yeah, so I imagine that some of you listening definitely have heard people speak throughout different conventions, and if you have gone up afterward and met them, and feel like that they might be willing to come speak to us, up here virtually for now, but eventually later in the year, hopefully in person. We are looking to round out the year. So by all means, suggest a way. Like we are open to them.
yes. Let's see.
And even if it's just subjects, even if there are subjects that you'd like for to hear about, maybe we'll be able to find someone who can speak on that, because some authors are also just, they do this. Like, take Tex Thompson, for instance. This is what she does. She goes around and gives presentations. That's, so they exist. So if there's a subject that we haven't talked about in a couple of years that you'd like for us to explore, you can send that our way, and we can see if there's somebody out there in the universe who is willing to, speak on the subject. Any other editing questions before we let everyone go?
I have a quick one.
Okay.
Not muted. Okay. I write basically, of course, I'm a poet that also writes other stuff, but I write a lot of stuff that lately I'm putting online, and it's going on within hours of when it's written, because I'm writing messages and stuff like that as a minister, and I'm writing them to my church, and we've expanded that. But how do we quick edit? And if you don't have a good answer, can we have something in the future that, where you've got to quickly edit what you put in and then publish, essentially, because I'm going to put it online?
Well, definitely working in daily newspapers like that, quick editing is what it was basically triage sometimes. So one of the big things that I found is different between editing newspapers and editing for book length things was, I had the ability to just make the edit and then, send it off to be printed out with language stuff, not with substantive, sources, and you couldn't change, the way the facts were portrayed or whatever. But, if it was just, use of language, if they use the wrong word or whatever, I could just fix it and go. I would say, to me, it's about quick decisions, because with a book length project, like even if you're going through a stage of revisions, you have 2 weeks, and even if it's, a fairly short novel, if that's what you do for those 2 weeks, you can mull over, am I using this word? You can Google it, and you can look it up in the dictionary, and you can, read other passages in other books and come to a conclusion. You don't have that much time with something you're talking about, or with daily newspapers. A lot of writers don't work with their internet connected, and I understand why, because I get distracted too much. But I definitely, if I have any question, Google is my first answer. If I want to know about, even if it's punctuation, syntax, whatever it is, somebody out there on the internet has had your question, and somebody else has answered that question on a forum somewhere, and Google finds it. And of course, it's essentially the modern day dictionary too. You just put the word in there and the definition will come up right at the top. But that is my suggestion is I do that on the fly. If I have a question, I have a hard time. And I think because I was a reporter and because I had to have my copy ready to go to the editor, on a deadline, sometimes, like half an hour after a football game. If I have a question as I'm writing, I have a browser open to Google, and it maybe didn't used to be, but nowadays somebody has had your question, somebody else has answered it. And knowing how to use Google, like if you're searching for a specific phrase, put it in quotes. And you can have a phrase in quotes and then a plus sign and then do it again if you're looking for two things that have to be in whatever query you're looking for. But no, that is my suggestion is, keep a browser open, keep a, tab open to Google and ask it. And you can even just phrase it as a question, because a lot of times, like on some of those forums, that's how people write. They actually ask a question and people answer. So yeah, that's my biggest tip on that, is to use Google. The Google machine knows all in a pinch.
Well, that's kind of what I'm doing now. And I also will, if I'm, quoting myself or what I'm saying, I'll put that in there and do a search and make sure that I haven't stolen that quote from somebody else unconsciously. But I didn't know if there were techniques or use, and I've written for the Ranger and the Globe News and all of that also. And I'm very familiar, but I always got that into the copy editor early so that they could catch me.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
I don't have that privilege right now. So
yeah.
thank you very much for your words. They were great. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I know that, I don't do this professionally in terms of giving presentations, and I talk way too much, in my everyday life. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen and great questions at the end. There's definitely, you can't have a presentation about editing and hit everything. So I'm very glad you all felt free to ask about some of the things, and some of the suggestions you had are things I never would have thought of or didn't know about. So that's what's great about having these sort of meetings. It'll be nice when we can have them in person, but thank goodness for Zoom, right?
Exactly. Well, thank you, Ricky. And I hope to see all the board members back at 2:00, and everybody else. We'll see you in a couple months. And maybe before that, if somebody else has another little workshop. So anyway, thank you.
All right. Thanks for setting all this up, Kim, as you have been for the past year and however long. Without you, who knows where this club would be. So thank you.
No. Thank y'all. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.